Girls with their nails done now.
Wasn't that pretty cool? Thank you, Happy, for that.
We've got new graphics.
We've got new graphics and everything now. It's quite funky there. Thank you all for joining us. This broke when we were doing our Friday roundup, and we didn't think it was right to cover it there because I'm going to tell you, if you want positive Stadia or completely and utterly balanced Stadia stuff, go watch that. We were very positive. We were actually being very focal on all the positives and how excited we were for state share. Absolutely worth checking that out. I really enjoyed that because we were going through all the platforms. Unfortunately, it always seems to be with Stadia, if there's good news, there is a book coming down the line. Jason Schreier, we knew this article was coming. It's been coming for weeks now. Ever since SG&E has shut down, we knew this was going to happen. Again, I am not going to share the article because it is behind a paywall. If you would like to view this paywall or get around this or view this content, and we're not saying anything bad or anything like that. If you want to, open up a browser in incognito mode or private mode, depending on your browser, you can view this. I think you only allowed to view 1 or 2 articles a week or a month or something, so you can view it that way. We knew this. We knew this was coming, and we will break this down. So. Just to say, we have seen the article, but we're not going to actually share it because it is behind a paywall of sorts. So bye-bye, article. And there it goes. Basically, this is just going over what has happened to Stadia throughout the whole turbulent lifetime of the product. I know there's been a lot of high feelings in this, saying that there's a couple of incorrect things in that. We are going to cover these incorrect things, or what some people feel is incorrect. There is also some interesting news in this, and some of the big wigs on Twitter as well have now chimed in. So if you're not black by Tom Warner, check out his post. And I always forget his name because I can't say it. It's half the battle as well with me. If you check out what Paul Tassi has said about this as well, just below some of his tweets, or Tom Warner's tweets. So just before we go break it all down, what is your overall thoughts on this, Barry? And I'm going to swap these around because I think this looks me better over this side, because I'm looking over this side, so it looks like I'm looking at you there.
No worries. I mean, I think first and foremost, you know, I know a couple of people have already said it in the chat. Is this start to finish a groundbreaking article of information that we do not know? No, it's not. Does it give other tidbits or insights into maybe things that we might not have known or might not have properly understood before, but had suspicions of? Possibly, yes. I think my overriding view reading it, if I'm honest, is it's just business. You know, people develop products and try and get them off the ground all the time, and they do business strategies, business plans to assess their competition, look at what their product is, what they've got, and taking it to the market. And I think it kind of summarizes pretty well what's happened when a tech giant jumps in with 2 feet and tries to do what they've done at the speed and haste that they've tried to do it. And I think it's, you know, it's not pleasant reading, I don't think. But then again, I think, as I said, I don't think it's, you know, it's anything massively shocking within there by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, I mean, I don't know really what else you can say until we start kind of going into the specifics. It's business, isn't it? You know, if you want to launch a service, you're going to have to spend money. And if you haven't got it right, and you maybe haven't done your market research right, or you go too fast, then, you know, there are 1,000,001 companies out there that crash and burn trying to get something off the ground. And it happens. It's a fact of life. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. This article, the only thing which I can see and that which is obviously 100% wrong is the number of games. That is the one thing which is standing out for me. They've put 80 games down when it's well over 100 games now. That is the only thing wrong with it. I know there's been a lot of talk about that it was $130 to buy in, and that's wrong. Unfortunately, that is 100% right. During the initial launch of Stadia, the only way to get into Stadia was you had to pay $130 to access the product, and that is true. So that changed. Wasn't it about this time last year? It was about March time last year. March,
yeah,
April.
I think it might have been February.
Yeah, so I was right. This time last year.
Yeah,
I'm taking that as a win. Because I get this T-shirt. Yes, I run. I know. Yeah, really old T-shirt. But yes, if this happened about a year ago, where it opened up, where you didn't need to have the £130, you could just play it through a browser with nothing at all. This article is nothing new or startling, but I think what people need to realize, it's not if it's new or old, or new information or old information. It is the person who's actually writing this article. Jason Schreier has a mixed reputation in the gaming industry due to political beliefs and other things. However, when he actually gets these sort of interviews, he does do his research, and he does have the sources. So if he says he's got 2 sources, he's got 3 sources, even if you're the biggest skeptic in the world of Jason, you know he will be he will have the things there. I am not the biggest fan of Jason Schreier. I'm putting that out there. I'm being nice and open, so you know where I'm standing in this. I think there's nothing new, startling, or anything like that. But again, this isn't a hit piece. I'm going to put that. This is not a hit piece, as a lot of people will think. This is him following up on his interviews, which he has got off developers, and I think this is only the start. I think we're going to get another one off him as well about things. And again, with I know people don't like anonymous sources, but unfortunately, that is how you need to read them. You can put as much salt as you feel necessary from that, depending from journalist to journalist, person to person. But with Jason Schreier, I would be pretty sure that these are pretty solid sort of sources he's got.
Yeah, I agree with that point. I mean, I think the whole
Oh,
the anonymous sources has to be. He has to do that. A lot of people will only talk under the guise of anonymous sources, partly to protect their reputation. At the end of the day, if you are one of those devs who was in that team and do want to find another job, the last thing you want to be doing is publicly running your mouth about about where you've just kind of come from. I think that goes without saying, and it's not just related to gaming journalism. I think it's across journalism everywhere. You will get a wide variety of information that comes from anonymous sources, which is done to protect people. It doesn't. Yes, I understand why people question the validity because it's like, well, why is it anonymous? But it makes it no less valid, an opinion. And I think, as we all seen with the last one, the last kind of piece that came out a few weeks back, with when it was referencing, the mail that went out a week before, everybody reacted in exactly the same way. Everybody said anonymous sources, and then all of a sudden Jade Redmond shared it, and everybody went, "Oh, okay, it was genuine then."
Yeah. Again, anonymous sources just again. This is an opinion, so what my belief in this is going to be different to what Barry's belief is, and this is going to be different to what your belief is. And for me, I would. If it's Jason Schreier saying anonymous sources, I'm more likely to believe it. However, with this as well, the point you've actually raised there about people are going to be talking a lot because they are upset and they just want to get it out of their system, basically. So tensions are going to be high about this. They are probably going to be a bit more open and a bit more paint things slightly or a lot worse than they really are. But some of the facts and figures, I would say, will be in and around of the ballpark in that. So I think that is something to bear in mind. First, actually, it's not actually mentioned in the article, but he has mentioned this in tweets, in that some of the games or the ports for games were tens of millions, and Take-Two, Ubisoft were raking in the cash for the ports. Again, I have absolutely zero problem with that, because that's what you need to do, and I have been very vocal on that. However, the article does seem to say that they have been overpaying for the ports, which is interesting, because the fact during this article, he has mentioned that even with the outrageous money they have been saying for their ports, some people have been not taking them. Let me see here. The amount of money, this is a quote, so quote, the amount of money Google was willing to spend came as a shock to veteran game developers, but even that wasn't enough, end quote. This is just something to keep in mind, but tens of millions of dollars to get Red Dead Redemption 2, like that's just bonkers sort of money. And it's not, believe it or not, I'm not actually surprised by the amount of money there. Barry?
No, I was just shaking in agreement, but in the sense of the numbers that he's talking about don't necessarily surprise me. To talk tens of millions in order to get hold of the content, really, yeah, it's not a shock. But I think the point that we're illustrating there is that people that have been in the games industry and are considered veterans are a little taken aback and surprised at the amount they're willing to pay. And I think that's, that you have to look at that in a sense of you're kind of almost paying over the market odds in order to have something. And, fundamentally that there is something within that, and there has to be a reason for that.
We've been told a load of times, and I've said it, and I think most people have said, what do you consider the best port on Stadia?
Division 2.
Jason Schreier has tweeted how much that was allegedly, I'm putting this allegedly here, $20 million to bring the Division 2 to Stadia. He's bringing the question, would it be better to pay 1 million to 20 smaller developers to try and get a hit? I'm just putting that out there. I think, personally, I think it should have been a bit of a mix. I'm going to say, I know that we literally just talked about this. Again, go back to the other show and you can hear me really talk enthusiastically about state share. Would it have been better to have brought say the Division 2, but skipped Assassin's Creed, one of the Assassin's Creed games, and got like Slay the Spire, Binding of Isaac, and really focus that onto State Share to showcase the tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think when you look back at it, it's your point is valid. I think a lot of people outside of the Stadia bubble, and even people inside the Stadia bubble, spent a lot of time saying we need bigger games. Stop bringing us indie titles. So there's two ways to reflect on it, I guess, in that sense. But that's 20 million is not, shall we say, a huge amount of money in order to acquire content. But let's say, for argument's sake, if you look at let's try and average that out, and if that figure is correct, and I know it's not a confirmed figure, but if we then say AC Odyssey, Division 2, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, The Crew 2, if they paid in the same sort of ballpark for less than a handful of games, they've probably paid in the region of 100 million plus just to get those kind of, those level of titles from one developer. That's before you then look at Doom, Cyberpunk, all the other games that they kind of gone out and got. Yes, they've invested in the platform. And I think the thing that does stand out for me is there's one of the comments in there where he talks about Google's mantra of think big and start small. And it's clearly evident that that's not how Stadia started. I'm not going to talk about the launch or the things that were said that kind of led up to it, because I think people have done those things a million times over. But it's clear to say the statement of intent was massive. It wasn't small scale. And if that kind of tells you, if it kind of flies in the face of Google's mantra, then it maybe kind of gives you an indication that it was very much an isolated project.
Yeah, okay. I think this is a really good point by Gandara here. Gandara, absolutely brilliant, comes to a load of our play-alongs. Stadia, that is a really great point there. I think it's getting the balance right. I think what this Jason Schreier article is saying is more that they've actually overpaid for the content, and I think this may actually have issues going forward, because the way Stadia is now, everybody knows Stadia is not in a great shape. I think that's maybe I'm trying to word this better than this. I think a lot of people, the majority of the gaming populace think Stadia is not in a good shape, and because of overpaying in these games now, or what seems to be overpaying in these games, Stadia have to go back to these developers going, we want you to port this. And if they lower the money, which indications to me, again, this is my opinion, indications to me that the Stadia budget has been reduced in that capacity, they are going to be in a worse negotiating position, and they're either going to have to equal or increase that budget, or that will increase the cost of bringing these ports across, because it's business. Gaming is a business. This isn't about gamers. It is a pure business decision. If you know that company A or Google has endless basically funds, and you are a developer and you know they're in a weak position and they need your content. You're going to be fighting, you know you're in a better position, you're holding the cards while Google is in a very, very weak position. So they're going to leverage that position. And if they say, no, we're only going to be offering you this, what's the devs going to say? See ya, bye. We're just going to go, because they know they're in a much better position. And this isn't me trying to run down Stadia. This is just talking from sort of business sort of lens. I don't like saying business lens. It's going to be called chasing stuff next.
And it's a good point. And I was about to say a very, very similar thing myself. If you've got a product that you know has terrific value and it's elsewhere, you can afford to stand your ground, and it's kind of negotiation 101. If somebody's got something that somebody wants and it's successful, it's going to cost you money, and ultimately you sit around that negotiation table, you either talk with the money or both parties walk away, one party unhappy, the other party not really bothered because they've already got their existing product. And the thing that does make me question on some level is, and this is a completely off the wall thought from my mind, but there are games out there that people have asked for, and is this an indication that maybe obviously they've worked to a budget, but is it a case that they've gone into negotiations with developers and developers weren't prepared to budge because they know they didn't need to budge, and Stadia weren't prepared to continue going up in the sense that they paid out? Have we missed out on titles that maybe people are calling out for purely on the basis of the fact that negotiations have failed round a table? That is something we don't know.
Yeah, this is the thing. I am not complaining about Stadia paying this thing. I have been one of the most vocal people out there going, they need to get into their pockets and bring the games to Stadia. I haven't really agreed with a lot of the choices about the games coming to Stadia. I think that's well known. But I'm actually applauding them for actually sticking their money where their mouths are. However, there does seem to be something about Stadia which is not sticking. I'm going to bring up another controversial figure within the Stadia community in Tom Warner. I agree with him in this part as well. Again, I just want to make sure I get the right wording of this. Stadia reminds me of Windows Phone. This is on Twitter, by the way. Microsoft spent millions trying to get developers to port their apps, and it never worked unless you have the dev love, the content, and the platform. Then it's very difficult to create something new. Again, this isn't me making fun of this, and this is going to bring into what we've been discussing about here. Worth remembering that Amazon Luna's game streaming service is powered by Windows. That means there's basically no porting process if you're already on PC, and easier path if devs are on console. This is something which has been going around the Stadia community over the last couple of months. Is it worth being on Linux over Windows PC? My position is, and I've said this before, if we don't know, it's if Stadia wants to be in for the long term, being on Linux and being under, aside from my head again, what's the Linux thing called again?
You on about Vulkan?
Vulkan is probably the better long-term play, but the better short-term play would be on Windows. That is what I have said. Again, the question here is, will Stadia stick it out to see the long-term benefits of this down the line? And it's really, really interesting now. Stadia is in a really, really interesting position, and the word is now out there that they have been overpaying for ports. So, as Trizerexer said there in the chat there, the development or the game dev community talks and they talk quite a bit, and the word will be out there that Stadia is overpaying for ports. So that is weakening their position going forwards, because we heard you paid X amount to this developer, we want the same, or we want more to bring the game across. This is where Stadia is in a bit of a pickle, because they are on Linux and because they are on Falcon. Again, it's just really, really interesting on how this is all going to pan out.
I think and to kind of touch on the point you were making there about that kind of age-old Windows porting process, Windows versus Linux and the porting process and the Vulkan engine. It's very reminiscent, and I think technology, if we look back at history and technology, we have these things that happen all the time. The best tech does not always win. If we go right back to the 80s, we had Betamax and VHS. Technically, Betamax was the far superior technology. VHS won. If we look at more recently, HD DVD, Blu-ray, two combatant formats. Sony backed Blu-ray, obviously for obvious reasons. Microsoft and their Xbox went down the HD DVD route. In one of the earlier generations, HD DVD fell by the wayside. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily the inferior tech is going to win all of the time, but I think it's something that we have to be aware of, and we have to look at that. Just because it's the best tech doesn't necessarily represent that it's going to be the lasting one. And I think that's something that's important.
Yeah, again, it's just really interesting to see how this is going to pan out. During his article here, he compares it again. We are not dumping on Stadia here. We're just trying to be as balanced as possible. We have called out some of the inconsistencies in this, what our feelings are on them. They are comparing Stadia to Microsoft and Luna or Amazon, and they're trying to build up their cloud solution step by step by step. You're not promising to be a console beater, which Stadia came out to basically said. And I think that is part of it. And it's something which is clear throughout this whole piece. His interactions on Twitter, it is PR and marketing has been their complete and utter downfall at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think the word that crept up in there is inconsistency, and I think it's a word that we've all seen and we've all probably voiced concern over, as the inconsistency of communication. And if you look at that PR, that marketing, right into kind of communicating with, the actual player base and kind of people in the wider community, it took a while to kind of really nail that on and get into a kind of a consistent rhythm. But it's, I think the way I always see it is, yes, I've spent a substantial amount of money investing in the platform. I've got it, I play it. I always look at it from the perspective that I want to know if there's stuff that is going on. I want to be able to look at these things objectively, and I 100% want to know kind of what's going on. Because ultimately, if decisions are being made or discussions are happening, or whatever behind the scenes, then nobody goes running towards the edge of a cliff and carries on running when they know they're at the edge of the cliff. And I think from a personal perspective, you like to know, you like to feel informed, and you want all of the information. If you ignore all of the bad stuff and say there's 100 games coming this year and it's got the best tech and this, that, and the other, but yeah, great, they're all positives to focus on, and they're all positives that we know. But to ignore kind of negatives or kind of detractors from the platform, or warning signs, or whatever you want to call it, for me is personally something that you cannot do. You have to go into these things with your eyes open. You have to be objective, and as a consumer, you do want to know. You.
I was I shared the wrong.
And Duncan's disappeared. While we're doing that, we'll just have a quick recap on some of the some of the comments that we've got in. Obviously, Dave Widnell there saying that he still feels it's early days coming in as a founder into cloud gaming. He never expected it to be mainstream for 5 years or more, and Google likes to play the long game. Google stuck with where absolutely. I think that's it is a valid point. It is certainly it's a game that's going to take time. It's something that has to mature. And I think that makes it a very, I don't want to say a hostile industry, but it makes it a very intense industry that if you cannot do the right things and hit your milestones, hit your markers, then you are going to kind of fall on your own sword.
And speaking of hitting markers, our friends over at 9 to 5 Google, this was written by Kyle Bradshaw, has detailed some of the Bloomberg article there. And the report is that Stadia user targets missed by hundreds of thousands. That is in this article, in the Jason Schreier article. This is very, very interesting. For me, this sort of indicates that the user base on Stadia is lower than people probably expect. If we're talking it's missed by a couple of 100,000, if it was millions, we would go on, that's really bad. But if it's only hundreds of thousands, then we're probably expecting it to be smaller. And what I'm talking about is the scale. So I think we are looking at a relatively small regular Stadia community active user base.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. I mean, I think there's always been a cloak and dagger kind of approach to kind of user numbers, and I know a lot of people tend to track kind of the Reddit, the Stadia Reddit as with the number of members or how many downloads the apps had and that sort of thing. But I think it is something that's it's kind of important, to kind of actually publish that. And I know nobody likes to publish stats that are below par, but at the end of the day, we have earnings calls, where everything is there to see. There's only so much room you can kind of have to hide. And at points, I think it probably would have actually helped if they'd come out and said the player base is X amount, just so that people had an indication of the scale, maybe what their expectations were. I think there's so much you can say about that, and you could go on really.
Yeah. If I'm just putting this out there, if Stadia had a user base of 5 million people and they missed it by a couple of 100,000, I don't think Stadia Games and Entertainment would have been cancelled. If their user base was looking to be 1 million people and they missed it by a couple of 100,000, yes, that is why it's gone. It's just the percentage difference is what they're probably looking at. And if it was just slightly under, then great. But for me, this will be probably a sizable miss with this. There is a very key paragraph. There is additionally to ensure they were pumping tens of millions of dollars. Says at the top end $20 million for Red Dead Redemption 2. That is a fifth of Red Dead Redemption's budget was paid by Stadia. Which is bonkers sort of money, bonkers. So that is what they're doing. But again, this isn't me making fun of Stadia because I want Stadia to go put their hands into the pocket to bring the games, but that does seem to sort of indicate that it is slightly overpaid, and that's why you might see some of these games are, I'm going to use the phrase I hate, are good proper ports, and some of these ports are quote unquote lazy ports, which I completely and utterly hate using that term because I do not agree with that term at all, but it's generally what the community sort of uses.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say, you can see sometimes the difference with the performance of the game and kind of the ongoing support and development that it gets on the platform. I think what the one that springs to mind, is NBA, the late 2K21, where it's been updated elsewhere, but seemingly kind of left in a little bit of a pool of its own, on Stadia, and hasn't received the love and attention that it should have got. And whilst I know, you could probably aim criticism at the devs, for that. Ultimately, I think that is something where you probably actually have to say people at Stadia have to be taking the devs to task, and especially if they're paying the sums of money that we're talking about here, you should be holding those devs to account to say, actually, hang on, we paid you bloody good money to bring a game and to support it and to support the platform and to make sure that these things come along. And I think maybe that comes back to kind of some of the behind the scenes management and that relationship between Stadia and the game developers as to how that's kind of worked. And I think in some instances the impression is given off that they've taken the hit for the money of to bring the game, and then off they've gone on their jollies for a little while and kind of just left it behind. And that is something that has to be, that partnership and that relationship and that synergy between platform and dev has to be managed very closely. And that is something that you do have to kind of say, how is it being managed? Is it being managed in the most effective way in order to nourish the most positive and the most fruitful of partnerships?
Yeah. There's two more points I want to come to, and then we'll start wrapping this up. This is the first one here. Actually, there's 3 points I want to come to, but we'll leave the third one to the end, which is a good one to end on, because I want to end on a positive. And This one here is, elsewhere in the report, we learned a bit more of one of the projects that SG&E were making, and it was a prototype between a Google Assistant and a Tamagotchi pet. This is something we thought was going to happen with Project Chimera, I always say that wrong, and Semantic ML. So yeah, I thought this was going to, something along them lines would happen, and I thought that would, the way they were talking and really publishing these tools, I thought this would have been one of the first games we would have sort of seen. I was talking maybe a bit like the card game, but this is something which would have been pretty cool to actually get out there. Even if they say this is just one of our wee prototype games that we're working on, go have a wee go. This is free on Stadia Pro, which is something we're building towards to the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. It would have been a fun little addition. You imagine as let's say as a pro member, for example, you kind of fire Stadia up, and then you've kind of got that there as, or even long term to on the free to play kind of scale of it, have that little demo there to kind of draw you in, and it's something that it would have certainly been attractive to kids, and certainly for other audiences. Yeah, absolutely, it would have been something that would have been positive to see them bring to the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is why I'm just so frustrated, because I've just seen what I was wanting Stadia Games and Entertainment to do. I was just wanting would have had their big role-playing game on the background. I was wanting all these wee short, wee quick, easy, wee silly games, as I call them, or as Kelly calls them, the wee silly games out there. This Tamagotchi type one, the card game they were building, this games to keep us on our toes, just to go. It's just really a tech demo, but we're going to give it to you. For flip's sake, a game which would have been brilliant on Stadia, for which SG&E could have brought, it's a dinosaur game on Chrome. That would have just gone down a treat. That's just something really stupid to put on there and go, here we go. And it would have been great to see people do that, and maybe have it with do you remember from the GDC conference where you could change the effects in the background? You could have it doing all the trippy effects and everything like that. It is just really frustrating to see some of this, how this is unfolded, because I think there would have been great wee tech demo games that they could have just dropped on it and go, what they could have done is we are working on this big we're working on a big game. Don't be worrying about it. We are working on this. These are the games. What we just want to show you how cool Stadia is going to be in the future. These are just wee smaller glimpses of games which weren't going to be for sale. They were just going to be like a pro park. Absolutely amazing sort of things they could have done.
Yeah, no, they really could, and it kind of does feel a little bit like a missed opportunity, I guess. They, as you say, they could have clearly gone on to do something massive with that, and it's something that, sadly, as gamers, we all want content. It's something that we're not going to get to experience, by all accounts, as it stands right now.
Yeah, my only worry is we're not going to see more games with state share and all these funky texts going on. We will go to the next piece. What was the next piece? Oh, yes, I remember what the next piece is. Throughout the whole article, Jason Schreier was basically saying the other people can get away with it because they're building up small and they didn't put the beta tag around it. Do you really think that having beta around Stadia would have saved them a hell of a lot of this negativity around it?
I think it has to have had. I think when you go out and put an announcement out about bringing features and this, that, and the other, and I know obviously they said features were going to come at a later point, but beta would have bought you at least a little bit of time. You probably could have coasted through the first 6 months of the year showing progression, development, and it still being under, that beta tag. And, you could have probably carried it on until November, let's say, for argument's sake, and said, look, let's do 1 year of beta, but let's really push for, for development. Because I think, we can all agree at the point where we're at, towards the end of 2020, everybody was starting to say, okay, things are coming together. It's starting to feel like, the rounded platform. Yes, there were still things to work on, like the UI and a search bar and, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, beta would have saved them a lot of headache. It's one of those, I guess it comes back to the age old, under promise and over deliver, or do you want to over promise and under deliver? And every day of the week, you're going to opt, if you can, to under promise and over deliver, because then everybody's expectations are kept in check. And I think that's something that's been a recurring theme, is expectation has never met the reality, and in some of those instances.
Yeah, I will say this. We'll see some talk about it was reported as more powerful than a PlayStation Pro and an Xbox One X. From what I've been led to believe by talk, again, this is using anonymous sources, so you can go, Duncan, you're talking the biggest load of nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just spiffing away there. But from what I have been told by a number of devs, again, you can take that or leave that the power on Stadia is there. However, it does take a bit of mucking about to actually showcase this power. And it's, again, we just have to, again, you can believe me or don't believe me, it's entirely up to you. But we have seen glimpses of the power with the Division 2, there being a pretty good port, while a lot of the other ports haven't been so good. And again, this isn't disrespecting Adam's work, because Adam does absolutely brilliant work with his pixel counts. A lot of these games, which are 4K 60 FPS, the Xbox could do it, the PlayStation Pro could do it, and that is just inflating the figures. It's the games like Immortals Phoenix Rising, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This is a bit of a concern if the devs are not allocating enough resources. That's the term I was looking for. Allocating enough resources to the port of these games to actually bring it up to standard, or up to not standard, up to the 60 FPSs and adding all that. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how all this actually goes out in the longer term. And that was a complete tangent, which I didn't really want to go off on.
Sometimes they're the best ones.
I'm just really hopeful that Stadia does recover, because I want everybody to come back to me and go, Duncan, you're 100% wrong. That's what I really, really want to happen. But again, we will see how all this goes out, because I want Stadia to be around here, not even 2 years down the line. I want Stadia to be 20 years down the line, because this should be a forever platform, as we've talked about before.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. The joy, and everything that playing games on Stadia has brought, and kind of showcasing the technology. You don't want it to go anywhere. You want nothing more than for it to be successful. Obviously, that's not necessarily in everybody's hands. Yes, people obviously have to spend money, in order to kind of illustrate and demonstrate that it's something that people want, and it's something that should continue. I mean, personally, I kind of feel like it's a decision that we necessarily can't control. And you have to kind of, there's an element of focusing on what you can control and not what you can't. Can you play games? Can you enjoy it? Yes. Okay, great, perfect. Can you control Google's decision, or whatever decision, as to what this service looks like, how it continues, that sort of stuff? No, you can't. And I would kind of say it's not for us to worry about as such, other than as consumers, you don't want to go ploughing $2,500 into a platform on content for somebody to just suddenly pull the rug from out your feet and go, but because that's the worst feeling in the world. When you throw a load of money into something and then it just disappears, because you kind of feel like you've wasted it, and nobody ever wants to feel that way. You want it to sit here, and you want to be playing these games for, as you said, not just years to come, decades to come, and taking advantage of the platform. It's showcased clearly that cloud gaming is something to be reckoned with. It's a force to be reckoned with. People just have to make sure that they tap into it and deliver everything successfully in order to keep the momentum going and to keep it growing. I think at the point in time in technology that we're at, with internet speeds, and obviously I know the US has some areas where data caps are in place, and that kind of might be easing. But in terms of technological infrastructures, we've never been at a better place other than to support cloud gaming. And that is where the excitement comes from, platforms like this to kind of continue and to go forward. And as gamers, you just need to kind of enjoy it.
Absolutely. We will end on a positive but controversial note. That wouldn't be me without saying that, wouldn't it? Stadia is coming to Stadia, like people had predicted. This is good news. I was 90% sure that it was going to come to Stadia. I think it was just leveraging the situation, because Stadia was at the very lowest. I think it was just coming. It was really bad. I was nailed on to coming for me, basically. But it has been confirmed that Stadia is coming to Stadia, which is absolutely great news, because I know at the time a lot of people were upset about this, because believe it or not, Stadia has a massive actual user base at the moment. I will look this up while you're responding to this news. But what's your thoughts on Stadia coming?
It can only be a positive thing. There were people who were excited at the prospect of it coming to the platform. Yes, there was the furore in update, and outrage at kind of the childish behavior, people throwing their toys out of the pram, all the kind of usual stuff that comes with it. But yeah, it comes back to that negotiation thing that we were talking about earlier. You know, at that point in time, they had a game that was successful everywhere, and you had a kind of weak duckling, so to speak, who were kind of going through a bit of a rough patch, and he used that to leverage it. And he probably ultimately in the back of his mind had every intention of bringing the platform. But, you know, if you're sitting playing a game of cards or you're at a negotiation table, you don't reveal all your hand at once. And ultimately, he's played his hand in the sense of, it's my product, I'll take it and I'll put it where I want. And if that's how you're going to treat me, rightly or wrongly, depending on your views on it, you know, ultimately, you could argue that he was acting in it. Yes, of course, it was particularly selfish, but you could argue that if that was the level of support he had, is that the level of support that the people who want to play his game could potentially end up getting from that same organization? And you have to think about reputation when you're partnering, when you're working with people. You know, that's just one of those things. But yep, absolutely. I think to kind of spin that back round, it's a massive thing that it's coming to the game. It does have a good player base. And I think no doubt when it drops, the community will be absolutely ecstatic at the fact that it's on the platform, and everybody will have great fun with it. And that's exactly what they should do.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk, and a couple of people have said, quite rightly, again, it's your opinion, and everybody will do that they're not going to buy the game because of the shenanigans which went on. My feelings on games are the same, no matter what platform they're on, no matter what. Buy a game if you want to buy a game. That is what it comes down to. Do not feel pressured into buying a game to support a platform, because that I just don't like that. And I've said that as well for Xbox, because there was a big kickoff about buying games, Japanese games on Xbox, to show that Xbox gamers wanted Japanese games onto the platform. Just buy games that you want to buy, and don't feel pressured or anything like that. Just do what you want with the games. With Tierra coming back to Stadia, it's not a juicy story. That is the bottom line. So it will not be picked up by a load of the big gaming websites, because it's a nothing story to them. I'm just being frank here, because Stadia is not at that level where they generate the revenue for them to write the articles. So you will see it on Stadia Source. Have got it. 9 to 5 have got it. We'll put it on, I would say, eventually today, because we haven't had our dinner or anything yet. We've just came straight on here and did our 6 o'clock show, or sorry, our 6 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 11 o'clock show every week, where we recap all the news. So it is just, again, if you want to buy the game, you go ahead and buy it. Everybody, except Kelly. Kelly's not allowed to buy any games. She's just not. She's just banned, because the swarm that comes out from her is just completely and utterly unreal. Either new swear words off her all the time, which is just absolutely mad. But again, I think it's really good news that it is coming. But again, just do as you feel right. If you want to buy a game, you buy a game. If you don't want to buy a game, don't feel guilt tripped into actually not buying a game just because a lot of people are. Just game how you want to game. That is my overriding philosophy. And game where you want to game.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. You know, buy as much content in as many places as you want to buy. You know, as you want to game. You know, I think I'd said it on Twitter recently. You know, I've very much come to the thinking, you know, that necessarily we're no longer at a point in time where one platform can fulfill all your needs. You know, but again, that's not an everybody thing. That, you know, that there are platforms that 100% can fulfill your needs. You know, as a gamer, if they tick all the boxes in terms of the content you play. Other gamers out there need to spread themselves across multiple platforms in order to have access to all of the content that they want.
Yeah, and I'm just putting this out here again. I'm going to ask you this question, and I'll give my answer. What is my favorite platform to play on? My favorite platform at this moment in time to play on is Stadia. Uh, I'm just putting this out there because I think people have said, "Oh, some people are not playing on Stadia." I am no longer playing under One Day Escape for most of my games. I am playing under a different account for reasons which I am not going to go into. But I am still playing on Stadia, and Stadia is my preferred platform. But I do play on other platforms as well. What about you, Barry?
Yep, exactly the same. I've for the last longer than the last few months, I've been split across multiple platforms. At one point last year I was playing Stadia, Xbox, Switch, I've gone across playing GeForce Now, playing Stadia, and to be honest, as it stands right now, for my own personal gaming, in the past couple of months particularly, it's either been Stadia or GeForce Now, dependent on what I've been playing. And I think, as we touched on in our earlier show, I ordered a Series X, so that can add to to the gaming collection as well, so that I've got a bit of variety, and I can kind of eke something out of the Xbox library as well.
Yep, exactly. It is just really, really interesting. I was going to end on something positive. No, I wasn't positive. That would be never me be ending positive. I'm just going to come back to you just for your final take on the article here. What was your overall take on the article, and do you think it is actually going to make any sort of difference?
No, it's not going to make any difference at all, because ultimately, there's a lot of it in there that we already knew. Is it going to upset people? Probably. Are there going to be things in there that people don't want to hear? Yes. Are there going to be things in there that people probably need to hear? Yes. That is the harsh reality. But ultimately, do I look at this article and say, does it define whether Stadia lives or dies? No, not at all. It doesn't actually, other than kind of a media outlet putting this out, from what we would classify as a well-respected games journalist, by some people's definition. I really don't think that it's going to have the weight behind it that suddenly brings the hammer down on Stadia at all. Stadia has shown itself that it can ride the waves. It's been resilient to this point, and they're clearly making business decisions behind the scenes in order to ensure that it can continue going for as long as they can possibly make it go, to avoid having to make any other decisions.
Yeah, I will sum up the article as one glaring mistake in the 80 games. The rest was basically a recap and just added some flavor to what we sort of knew anyway, or we could have had a fair guess of it. Again, this is going to make noise in the wider gaming industry because of who has actually wrote this, and now the facts and figures are out there. Is it going to affect Stadia in the short term? Not in a chance of it. However, again, this is just going to weaken their negotiating position for bringing more games, the bigger games to the platform, and the higher profile indie games as well. So overall, I think it's a reasonably fair article. I do not think it is a hit piece. I think the timing of it is just a normal sort of article going out there. It's nothing to do with blog posts, because I think there's been a lot of talk throughout the whole community. I am not singling anybody out here. There's been a lot of people saying a lot of these negative articles about Stadia come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Again, that's just busy sort of days of the week. And again, I don't think this is a coincidence, I think it is just a pure coincidence that this came out today, because normally we do not have blog posts on a Friday. Again, I'm not actually that, I don't think there is a lineup in that, but again, I think it's a reasonably fair take. I don't think there's anything really out there going, gotcha, Stadia, but I don't think there's anything really big positive. bar the fact that Stadia have been out there buying the games, getting the ports across, but the overpaying of it may backfire down the line. But again, Barry, you can give the recap. Could I forget about things? We've only got the one thing on Sunday now, don't we? This weekend.
This weekend, yep, we've only got the one thing. We've got our Cloudy Play Along on Sunday, which is at 9 p.m. GMT, 4 p.m. EST, and 1 p.m. PST.
Cool. I don't think we've decided what we're playing yet. Sure, we haven't.
No, we haven't. We probably need to have a conversation on that.
Yep. So if you have any suggestions, you can chuck them to us and we will take them on board, because we are trying to get this as wide as possible. This is why we want bring it cross-platform for absolutely everything, so it doesn't matter what platform you're on, because then everybody can join in. Rainbow Six Siege would be class to get, and because that's with Luna, that's with GeForce, and hopefully Stadia with crossplay as well. But again, thank you all for watching, and we do roundups on a Friday night at 6 o'clock UK, 1 p.m. Eastern, and 11 a.m. Pacific. And that's going to be wonky for a couple of weeks because of the time the clock's going spring forward when the clocks go forward. But it will settle down again for us. But we will put the times out there, and we hope to see you there. So thank you all for joining, and I hope everybody has a good one, and everybody have a great weekend and play lots of games.
Yes, go and play the Outriders demo.
Exactly. See you later. Bye.
Bye.